So this whole chapter is called Joleta. And that's kind of the stuff that I want to talk about is Joleta. And I'd be so interested to see what you guys thought when you first met Joleta, because I have some issues with her characterization so far. So Richard is coming back from France, from where he was dealing with stuff with Lymond and the little queen, and coming back finally to see his son. And he is now transporting across Joleta. And so this is on page 27. So this was really interesting because I was actually so intrigued about this meeting between Richard and Joleta, because it says here, as Joleta walks into the room where Richard is, then she was in the room. It's a very sudden arrival, and his mouth opened just a little and stayed open. And so that's upon him seeing Joleta. And my first thought, because then it says lower down here, he was near suffocation. Richard Crawford, insufflating mournfully, refilled his lungs. So he's near suffocation, and he's the word mournfully has been used. My first thought was he has seen Joleta, and the first thing he's thought about is Eloise, his sister, who I would say potentially looks like Joleta to a point, at least with light hair and light eyes. I'm assuming that their younger sister, who passed away, was, because she was said to have, I'm assuming that she had the family colouring of the Crawfords, that is like the blonde cornflower blue eye colouring, because Lymond made a comment at one point that Richard had missed out on the family colouring, but which makes me think that everyone else got it except for him. And so my initial thought was, oh, Richard is like, has an arrow through his heart, because it seems like he's seen his sister at about the same age that she died. But no, that's not it. She's just incredibly beautiful. And that just made it seem, I don't know, because I had that initial thought, it then seemed cheap that, oh no, he's just this 30-plus-year-old man who is staring there gawking at a teenage girl because she is just physically stunning. And I don't know, I just found that unbelievable. And there's another couple of instances, I think, where maybe Tom Erskine meets her and maybe Kate, and they both have a similar type reaction. And I just find it unbelievable and forced. This is my rant about Joleta and just having issues with how she's been introduced. Never in my life have I actually, and I've seen many super attractive people, like in person, never have I actually sat there gawking or even been caught that unawares. Like, I will have an initial thing of like, oh, that person is extremely conventionally attractive according to today's beauty standards of how far apart eyes should be spaced and how turned up the nose should be at the tip and how curled eyelashes should be, how rosy cheeks should be, how youthful we should be. Okay, never have I actually been like that at someone or even close. And that could just be a me thing. I don't know, it feels overdone. And I also think that this is a personal thing that a lot of people probably can relate to Richard having that reaction. I'm just not one of them. Anyway, so they have a chat. It seems like Joleta is also quite well spoken. And well informed, like she knows about Lymond and even inquires about, oh, he's lost his title, the Master. Richard, interesting, is like, luckily for me, my brother Francis does not mind losing it. Aww. That's just so nice that Richard can say that, and that it's totally true and that there's no bad blood between them. And that was just such a lovely thing to say. And whatever Joleta has heard about Lymond, because I'm assuming she's heard some like potentially of the more mischievous things, it's really nice that that Richard is saying that about his brother, that his brother truly is for the family and not necessarily just in it for titles. But then he said, you must meet him. So Richard's like, oh, you must meet Lymond. And later in the chapter, he's just like trying his best to make sure that they do not meet. Oh no, like even that same paragraph, after Richard said, you must meet him, he then thinks to himself, for humanity's sake indeed, it was worth making quite an effort to keep these two apart. Why is this just so dramatic? Richard, what do you think, for humanity's sake, because she's so beautiful and it would be a shame that she's soiled by Francis? Oh, on behalf of all women, that makes me feel so objectified. But yes, I know this is the 1500s and I need to just stop it. Richard takes it upon himself in this chapter to be the shielder of teenage girls from Lymond. It's so funny. He actually thinks about this a lot. He's like trying to avoid Francis going back to mid-culture, so trying to avoid Joleta going back to mid-culture so that Francis isn't around, but he also knows that she can't go elsewhere to other places he doesn't trust. I love the line here that after Joleta falls ill, and like actually kind of weird that she falls ill. Like I was trying to think what would be the problem that would be unexpected. She's pregnant? That won't be it. That would be interesting though if it was, and no one suspected that, and then the gypsy comes and like gives her like an abortion. Only the gypsy knows. What would it have been? A UTI, maybe? I'm assuming it's not gastro because I don't think it would be. Maybe she just had the flu. But at the end of the day, if she's been on a ship for weeks and weeks, flus are viruses that require someone to give it to them. So for her to get it right at the end of the journey, and actually I don't know how long it takes to cross. Maybe they're not on the ship for weeks and weeks. Maybe it only takes like a week to get across. It could be the flu. It's just that the sudden onset of her illness makes me think that Dunnett was trying to, like, it feels a little bit plot devicey that Dunnett was trying to get her to end up at Flaws Valley somehow, because I think the meeting between Pippa, Kate and Joleta is going to be important down the track. I think that these three ladies are going to have a lot to do with Lymond's life in the future. And I think that I don't know, it just feels a little everything about Joleta feels forced. I don't know why. But it's Richard is literally the protector of teenage girls. He also protected Agnes that one time in the river when Dandy Hunter was like trying to kill Richard, and Richard had Agnes like on his horse trying to protect her. It's like a really similar situation. Richard keeps finding himself with young women to protect. So they go to Flaws Valley and we find out that Gideon Somerville is gone. And as in he's died. I thought that they were a actual real life family, and so that Gideon Somerville had actually died during that time naturally anyway, but they're a made up family, so Gideon is just no longer. That's okay, because I mean it's not okay. I really liked Gideon, but Kate actually ended up being more interesting in a way because of Kate's reaction to Lymond. And Kate now running Flaws Valley is honestly the coolest thing. She has won the Lymond Chronicles. She has won this whole series in terms of being, I would say, like the luckiest woman, because she's married a really lovely guy called Gideon Somerville, who is obviously lovely and only had to have one kid, not 14, and that was a daughter, and Gideon was in love with both of them. Gideon loved both Pip and Kate. They live in a really nice house, not too rich that people are going to target them, but not too poor that they're left wanting for anything ever. And she also has purpose, like she's running this whole thing to the point where when Gideon died, he's left everything in her name and not passed it to some long distance male heir. Kate Somerville, she's won the lottery. Like she has the best. I would take her position, I think, out of anyone's if I was being realistic. Like she gets to run this really beautiful countryside farm, still gets like free tax money from everyone around her just by virtue of title. And she's got a beautiful daughter, and Lymond gets visits by Lymond. And Richard, I would also be like, I would be over the moon with a visit from any of the Crawford brothers, like Richard or Lymond. Probably actually be easier if Richard visited more often. I feel like Mariotta needs to meet Kate and also Sibylla. I feel like they'd probably get along. At least Mariotta, yeah. And also she's not even 30, like she's young. No more than turned 30 yet, small, sharp-tongued and plain as a brown hen, Kate Somerville was priestess and nanny at once to her people and a legend to her friends. I love you, Kate. I was annoyed at Kate a little bit in Game of Kings, but no, she's cool now. It would just be so fun to run all the granaries that she's got and all of the animals. Like, it would be so beautiful to just work in that countryside day in and day out. As plain as a brown hen. So then there's a line right after that that says, at the approach of the most beautiful creature in Europe, the mistress of Floor Valleys was straddling her farmhouse wall. Cool image that she's straddling a farmhouse wall, but that's not the issue I've got. Why is Dunnett making it so obvious to us readers that Joleta is the most beautiful creature in Europe? This is, I mean, I disagree because Lymond is. And this is subjective, damn it! Throughout all of her work, Dunnett has never forced a feeling upon her readers. At least I feel she hasn't. Everything Lymond we know is conventionally attractive, but we have never been given a line like, he is the most beautiful creature in Europe, or anything close to that. In fact, the first description we get of Lymond in Game of Kings is actually kind of dodgy, like in that he's described in a way that doesn't necessarily say anything about his looks, but says a lot about his personality. I want to go find it now, hang on. I know it was really early on. The clothes, this is on page 21 of Game of Kings. The clothes, black and rich, were vaguely slovenly. The skin sun-glazed and cracked. The fine eyes slackly lidded. The mouth insolent and self-indulgent. He returned the scrutiny. Every line of him spoke palimpsest-wise with two voices. This is the sort of description we get of Lymond, and we continuously get similar descriptions like that that skirt around, like, telling the reader what he looks like and just really describing aspects of him that describe personality. We do end up finding that he is an attractive man just by the influence he has on people and how they react to him, but in a very subtle way, not in the way of Richard standing there gawking at a teenage girl. Dunnett is not stupid. She knows that she's forcing the reader to get into their head that Joleta is beautiful and that people are stunned around her. And she's done it in a very clunky and obvious way, very different to her usual writing style. Like, she must know that that's what she's doing. Whenever you meet a character like this in a book, like, you can't help but think, oh, okay, well then obviously if this person is so beautiful, this is obviously going to be the love interest for the rest of the book. It's like some sort of romantasy where the main love interest walks in and they might appear disinterested, but the way that they're described as being like so stunningly beautiful that you're like, that's the person. And that kind of makes it boring because you're like, oh, okay, now we know the ending. Like, if Lymond and Joleta come together and they instantly like each other, to me that just seems dull and predictable. If they come together and they don't like each other, kind of like an enemies to lover, like lovers, like they have some sort of issue with each other, but then they work through that and come together, that's still going to feel predictable. What wasn't predictable was Lymond's relationship with Kristen Stewart. I also did not predict in the last book Lymond's relationship with, you know, growing between Robin Stewart. Like, Lymond's relationship with Robin Stewart was like not one that you'd ever thought would be so intense at the end, but it was. Same with kind of Oleamro, like you never thought it was going to have that, you never thought how they were going to come together. I also did not expect Lymond to actually sleep with Una O'Dwyer. I did not. And I didn't until the moment that they were in the room together and I was like, oh, it's going to happen. Like, I didn't actually truly think that that would have necessarily happened. And so it was really nice. And now I don't know, like obviously don't give me any spoilers, but it feels like from this point where I'm reading, that if Joleta and Lymond are like the couple that go forward for the next 4 books, I'm kind of meh about it. I don't know. Lymond is so unconventional. Don't give him such a conventionally obvious choice of this beautiful young girl who seems like she's quite intelligent and mischievous. Like she's so obviously Lymond's like similar to Lymond and has similarities that it just seems like fated. What we haven't seen from Joleta necessarily at this point though is if she has a good heart, because I think that's what got Lymond about Christian Stewart, is that he could see that Christian was actually a really good person. And I think at the end of the day, Lymond could probably care less. Yeah, there's all this talk about him trying not to be bored, but I think that he really respects when someone is a good person over everything else. And so I've yet to see what Joleta is like with regards to her actual like ethics and how she behaves. So I'm sure we'll see that over the coming chapters. A part of me kind of wants her to be like a mini Margaret Lennox, like in the making. She's beautiful enough to be able to manipulate people so well. And the thing about when you are stunningly beautiful, like she's not dumb. She knows how much power she has. Like, interesting. Once again, we have Kate finding her mouth slightly open, shuttered again, looking at Joleta. We also find out that Kate has actually a room aside in her house for the Crawfords. It's just super cute. I bet you it's the same room that they put Lymond in when Lymond was injured. The one that he locked everyone out of when he was tending to his own wounds. Richard also says again, and what do you think of the god's gift from Malta to the Crawfords? Sorry, no, that's Kate. And what do you think of God's gift from Malta to the Crawfords? Referring to Joleta. Oh, it's just so objectified. So Kate, we know, has reactions to Lymond, and this chapter kind of confused me with regards to Kate's actual feelings with Lymond, because she seems a little bit jealous about Una O'Dwyer, because she's like, oh, Una O'Dwyer's beautiful, but doesn't then seem weird about Joleta, despite knowing that Joleta's going to go back and live with the Crawfords. It's like, Kate, if you're really worried about having competition in the form of Una O'Dwyer, shouldn't you also be annoyed about Joleta? But she didn't seem to be, so I don't know, maybe she truly thinks that Lymond wouldn't actually go for that. Pippa, so this is grown-up Pippa at 13 years old. Pippa who, when she was 9 or 10, was forced into a really hard situation for a child that age with Lymond, and then Lymond had gifted her like some sort of medallion or something, and she'd stepped on it and destroyed it, which was fair. I definitely think Pippa has a right to feel how she is feeling. She's 13, so like she's obviously being a little bit immature about it, but yeah, she's 13. I can imagine that Pippa is actually quite confused with her feelings, because it seems like she doesn't like Lymond because she feels like her mother, Kate, likes Lymond, and in the context of Gideon just dying, that must be quite a threat for Pippa, to have her mum like someone who she really doesn't like, and she's associating Gideon's leaving with Lymond's, with her mother's turned eye towards Lymond. There's also probably a part of Pippa that, being a teenage girl with lots of hormones, might actually be confusing her hatred with Lymond for like a crush obsession. I like that theory, to be honest, and I kind of want that to be the theory. Pippa though seems like a very typical girl, nothing special about her aside from the fact that she is quite emotional and passionate about her emotions. She's described as plain, flat-chested, etc. compared to Joleta, read Mallet, whose courage was of the order of her brothers, and whose self-discipline on occasion went far beyond her years, willed herself better, and she moved to the garden, sang, played, and indulged in a ferocious gift of mimicry, talking to all and everyone she met, from the kitchen boy to Kate's stubborn steward, and lit floor valleys as with Mediterranean sunlight from within. So now we have this picture of dull Kate and Pippa just chilling out at Floors Valley, and then the light of the world, Joleta, comes in and lights everything up, and it just, like, sunlight from within. A very Lymond-esque type thing to do. Like, if Lymond was in Floors Valley, that's the same thing that he would do, is he brings all this, like, enthusiastic energy to wherever he goes. And it seems like Joleta's doing that too. Joleta and Pippa have a bit of a talk where Pippa ends up crying because she's talking about Lymond and she's confused about her feelings, and Pippa says and Joleta says, middle-aged ladies often imagine they have fallen in love. It doesn't mean anything. Your mother is very sensible, you know. And this is so obviously interesting that a 16-year-old is like observing that older women tend to fall for hero type men and imagine themselves that they have fantasies, and is basically saying that, I assume, that Kate, even if she has those fancies, isn't ever going to act on them, and that she's very sensible. And I definitely agree that Kate is going to put Floors Valley above Lymond any day. I would definitely believe that. It just, and that's really insightful of Joleta to say, except that it's not insightful because it almost is insulting to be told that, hey, your mother has a crush on the person that you really don't like. But don't worry, she's sensible enough, so you'll be fine. Like, was she insightful enough to realise that saying that to Pippa at that time was not correct? Was not the right thing to do? Like, no, she wasn't. But she's 16, so I can't really blame Joleta for not being too insightful. She's no Sibylla after all. I love this line at the bottom of 34. Tom Erskine was haplessly fond of them all with regards to Lady Coulter and her two sons. He just loves the Coulters. They're so different though. The discussion between Mariotta, Sibylla, Richard, and I think is Tom there, regarding what to do about Joleta was so hilarious. I think Richard has an unfair view of Frances, and I am kind of on Sibylla's side here. Like, Sibylla's like basically on the side that, sure, I understand that having Joleta in the house might not be perfect with regards to Lymond, but she has faith in Lymond with regards to him not acting on that. And understanding that a 16-year-old virgin child is not the same as a 30-something-year-old Una O'Dwyer. There is a time and a place for seduction. And I honestly think that Francis, when he is not drunk Taddy Boy, does stick to his own rules with regards to respect to women. Like, we've seen him disrespect a lot of men, but he is very careful about women. And I agree with Sibylla that Francis would actually respect Joleta. He respected Kristen Stewart. He respected, he's not I've never seen him like truly actually go above and beyond consent with a woman, or even near. I say that and I'm just going to have to reread things again really carefully on my next read through, but I think Sibylla's correct. Richard, having seen Taddy Boy, it's fair call, but I do think Richard saying, now that he's back, he'll want something like falling romantically in love, or what else does he say? Get some presentable maids, or better, choose one or two grooms for their looks. Okay, accurate description of what Lymond wants, Richard, but there's a difference between Lymond gorging himself when he knows the people are consenting to that and equally as bad as him. But I don't think he's going to mar innocence. I just don't think Francis would do that. I hope. Richard saying that though in the 1500s to get 2 grooms for their looks was so unexpected. I could not deal. I laughed so much, especially because Sibylla's like, that's enough. Sibylla knows. Sibylla knows her son is like bordering on bisexual, or definitely bisexual. It's against religion, so it's really bad to not have a heterosexual relationship back then. I agree with Sibylla totally. I have never lacked authority over my sons yet, and to suggest that a guest in this house would be in danger is a stupidity verging on viciousness. The rest of your observations we shall consider unsaid. So Sibylla is like, yeah, like what Francis does abroad is his own misfortune. What he does under my roof is what I and your wife permit him to do. Boss line. This is why we love Sibylla. And it's true, I actually feel she's correct. I think when Sibylla is around and actually disciplining Francis, Francis is like, okay, don't step out of line. Mama's here. And Richard's like, okay, but if he isn't touching her, what if she wants him? And Sibylla's like, so? Like, that doesn't change the fact that Francis is not going to stray from his moral boundaries. Mother, she's too young for that kind of heartbreak. Something tells me that Joleta is not going to fall for Lymond. And I don't think Lymond is going to fall for Joleta, at least not immediately. Once again, if they do later, I'm still going to be annoyed because it just seems like such a setup. But if they come together and instantly like each other, I'm going to throw this book across the room. If anyone can tell me how I can possibly think that Joleta's characterization is a little bit less forced, please tell me that it is going to improve. I would really like that. It has felt so forced in this chapter. Richard says, what do you think it costs me to admit that marriage between Francis and any young convent-bred girl is, in all honour, long past allowing? Like, Richard knows that he could never in good conscience allow Francis to marry such an innocent woman. I do think at the end of the day, Francis could marry someone like that. And I don't know, does Richard have to sign off on Francis's marriage? Sure, Richard, you can admit that it doesn't seem right. It's all about honour, I suppose. Honour, honour, honour. Like, all the rumours about Francis will catch up with him wherever he goes. And even if Francis ends up saving Europe from like World War 0.5, apparently that's not enough to make up for the fact that he was Tatty Boy. Like, that's kind of annoying. Like, how many good deeds do you have to do to wipe off like a single bad year of your life? It's a good question. I think Richard is a bit harsh here. Oh my god, Sibylla's observations on Jenny Fleming, on point. If I know Jenny, she'll be far too interested in returning to France to acquire another little insurance package against her old age to trouble about Joleta. Okay, so they're sending Joleta to the Erskines, right, okay. But I just love that Sibylla, so everyone can see right through Jenny Fleming, and that Jenny is now in her 30s and she's worried that her beauty's going to fade, and she's now trying to like pop out kids to insure her against being irrelevant. Because at the moment her only relevance is the fact that she is still rich and young and beautiful, and isn't, like, honestly doesn't seem like she's adding much else. In fact, she's just causing a lot of problems for everyone. Once again, horrible to have to use such objectification for women back then, but anyway. Richard's like, the Erskines know better than anyone the dangers of Francis with time on his hands. Yeah, we do not want Francis sitting there twiddling his thumbs. That's like the calm before the storm. And it's really interesting. There's a quote here that says, it was a matter of fact the first argument with his mother that he'd ever won. One, because he finally got Joleta sent to the Erskines, and had he known it, the most useless. So that tells me that it was a useless argument to win, because Lymond and Joleta are going to meet regardless of where Joleta is at the time. They're going to find each other, and they are going to be fated partners for the rest of time. And once again, I'm not into how predictable this feels and how forced it feels. Give me something unpredictable, Dunnett. We have such high expectations of Dunnett. If this was in any other book, I'd still be like, this is really good writing and amazing. But with Dunnett, it's like, it's such unfair expectations. So Tom Erskine goes back and gets Joleta, and they have a chat, and apparently they're explaining that Pippa still doesn't like Lymond, why that's relevant, why Tom would find it necessary to ask, how is Pippa going? I mean, Tom's just a nice guy, I suppose. It's just it's an interesting detail to add in, and it does make me think that Pippa is going to have a lot to do with Lymond's life in the future. They obviously have to meet, because we need Pippa to now like Lymond. That I'm interested in seeing. And Joleta are tumbling last-minute possessions into the cart, Pippa laughing and Joleta singing snatches of rather rude lyrics, and did not see the shiver that overtook Kate. So two things, Joleta is mischievous. And what is Kate shivering about? Okay, I think I know what this shiver is about. Kate is either shivering about the fact that Tom has assured Kate that he'll protect Joleta, which it doesn't seem likely. She could be shivering about the fact that she knows that that's going to be impossible. But I also wonder if she's shivering about the fact that there will come a time one day when Pippa doesn't hate Lymond anymore. That's going to be really interesting, because if Kate has like a mini crush, honestly, I don't think Kate is like too fussed about Lymond. That's what it feels like. I know that she butted heads with him in Game of Kings and obviously has like a little bit of envy towards Una O'Dwyer, but I honestly think Kate is, and she was described like this in Game of Kings as well, as she's always been the one that people rely on and like the mature one, despite being relatively young. I think she's probably a few years older than Lymond though, definitely. I think Kate is that mature person who knows her place in the world more and is very much rooted in reality. Maybe she's worried about the fact that when Pippa realizes that she actually likes Lymond, Pippa's going to be like 15 years old. And not 25, which is what Kate was. Anyway, maybe the shiver is just because Kate is also maybe, I don't think she'd be worried about Joleta. Maybe there's also envy there. I don't know. I'm really interested. I've got a question mark basically next to that. Like, why did Kate shiver? Joleta is singing snatches of rather rude lyrics, very much like Lymond, and maybe that's why Kate shivers, because she's like, this girl is mini Lymond. I think that they're gonna be together. Don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry about the rant about Joleta on the chapter called Joleta. I just had issues with how her character was brought onto the page in a non-subtle way, and it has subconsciously made me rebel against wanting to like her and have the same reaction to her as I feel like I should be having, or that Dunnett is wanting me to have. Unless Dunnett is purposefully trying to set Joleta up to be so angelic that she actually is rotten on the inside, that would be a lot more interesting to me. Because at the moment, if she really is just like this perfect, slightly mischievous, like little version of Lymond, but like probably nicer, like it just seems really forced. We'll see. So don't hate me for thinking that or saying that. I'm here just to give you my honest thoughts always. That have changed so much. There was a time, if you recall, when I really liked Dandy Hunter. And a time when I really liked Richard, and I still like Richard, even though I had some chapters where I really didn't like him. Anyway, I will see you then for maybe the first 3 chapters of the next part, because I'm definitely going to start reading the 3rd chapter now. See you next time.